There was once a poor little boy. He had no fine clothes to wear, no grand house to sleep in, and no coins to clink in his pocket. But what he did have was a question. Every day as he walked barefoot on the dusty road, he wondered, why was I born like this? Why do others have so much while I have so little? And one day, as he sat beneath a tree, he heard the wind whisper through the leaves. It said, because what you have now is not meant to define you, but to refine you. That day, something changed. He stopped looking at what he lacked and began to see what he could learn. He learned patience, because hunger does not go away when you wish it to. He learned humility, because pride cannot fill an empty stomach. And he learned strength, because every day he chose to keep walking, even when his feet bled. Years passed. He grew, not just in age, but in awareness. He began to see that wealth is not measured by gold, but by gratitude. That the poorest person is not the one without money, but the one without meaning. And when people asked him, how did you endure so much? He smiled and said, I was never poor. I was simply being prepared. My friends, we all meet the poor little boy within ourselves at some point. He appears when we lose hope, when we feel left behind, when we question our worth. But remember, life does not test you to destroy you. It tests you to awaken you. The soil must be broken before the seed can grow. So when you feel lost, when life feels unfair, sit beneath your own tree for a while. Listen. The wind still whispers, and it will tell you, you were never meant to stay poor in spirit, only to discover the richness that was hidden within you all along. Every profound lesson in life often begins in silence, in simplicity, and in humility. The story of the poor little boy begins not in a palace, but in a forgotten corner of the world where dreams are small and survival is the only plan. There are no riches, no grand gestures, no background of glory, only a child, barefoot and unguarded, standing at the edge of life's vast unknown. His world is simple, yet in that simplicity lies the raw truth of human existence. We are all born with nothing but breath and curiosity. Everything else we call ores, wealth, titles, possessions, are later additions, fragile and fleeting. The boy's poverty is not only material, it is symbolic. His empty hands mirror the emptiness we all carry before we begin to understand who we are. Struggle strips away comfort, but it also strips away illusion. The boy's hunger makes him attentive to life's smallest gifts, a drop of rain, a piece of bread, a kind glance. When one has little, one sees more. When the noise of abundance fades, the music of awareness begins. In this way, the poor boy's story is not merely about hardship, it is about purity. The purity of seeing life without filters, of being present with nothing but one's own breath and will. And yet, within that innocence lies the seed of transformation. The boy does not know what destiny awaits him, nor does he understand the value of his suffering. But his simplicity allows space for growth, for wisdom to enter where pride would not. He is unguarded enough to feel pain, and therefore capable of learning from it. His struggle, though silent, becomes sacred. It prepares him for the moment when he will realize that what he lacks on the outside, he is meant to find within. As the poor boy walks through the uneven roads of his world, a quiet question begins to rise within him. Why is life this way? It is not a cry of rebellion, but a whisper of confusion, a child's honest attempt to make sense of pain. In his eyes, others live in abundance while he counts every grain of rice. Others laugh freely while he carries the weight of hunger. Yet this questioning, though born of sorrow, is not weakness. It is the very first movement of awakening. To ask, why, is to begin the search for meaning. The mind may not find immediate answers, but the heart learns patience through the asking. And so, through his questioning, the boy takes his first step on the unseen path of self-discovery. Life's unfairness is a mirror that shows us both the cruelty and the mystery of existence. When the boy looks into that mirror, he does not see a reason, he sees a challenge. The question of, why me? Echoes through every soul that has ever suffered. It is the question that connects kings and beggars, the powerful and the powerless. It reveals that pain is not selective, it belongs to the fabric of being alive. The boy's confusion becomes universal. He is no longer just a child in poverty, but a reflection of humanity itself. Every person who has faced loss, rejection, or despair knows the sound of that same question resonating in the heart, unanswered yet unforgettable. But in that very tension, in that endless questioning, a deeper awareness begins to form. The boy realizes that understanding cannot always come from logic. Sometimes it must come from endurance. When he asks why, life does not always respond with words. It responds with moments, with encounters, with lessons that shape him slowly. The human desire to understand suffering is not about removing pain. It is about transforming it into wisdom. The boy's curiosity, though born from hardship, becomes the light that prevents him from falling into darkness. And even without an answer, he learns to keep walking. For sometimes, the act of asking sincerely is already the beginning of becoming. When the poor boy grows tired of questions without answers, he turns to the only companion that never abandons him, nature. It does not speak in words, yet it communicates more deeply than any human tongue could. The rustling of leaves, the quiet hum of the river, the whisper of the wind, all become gentle voices guiding his awareness inward. Beneath the tree where he rests, he feels the stillness that does not judge, does not compare, does not demand. It simply is. And in that silent presence, he begins to understand that truth is not always spoken. Sometimes it is felt. Nature teaches him without instruction, without reward. It teaches him to listen. The wind that brushes his face becomes more than a breeze. It becomes a messenger. It carries with it the stories of distant lands, of mountains that have stood through storms and rivers that have carved their way through stone. The boy realizes that everything in nature endures through change. The tree bends but does not break. The river flows but never clings. The sun sets only to rise again. Each element whispers a truth about life. The wind tells him that movement is necessary, that stillness and flow coexist, that loss is not the end, but a transformation. He learns that the same air that chills him also sustains him. Just as life's hardships can also shape him, as he listens more deeply, he feels that nature's wisdom is not separate from his own, that the calm of the tree, the patience of the mountain, the resilience of the river, all exist within him, waiting to be remembered. Nature does not tell him who he should be. It reminds him of who he already is. The wind's message is simple but profound. You are not apart from the world, you are a part of it. And through that realization, the boy begins to see that understanding does not always come from thought, but from harmony, from aligning the rhythm of his heart with the quiet wisdom that has always surrounded him. There comes a time when the poor boy realizes that his outer world has not changed. The same worn roads, the same empty hands, the same humble shelter, yet something within him begins to shift. The questions that once filled him with bitterness now return as quiet invitations to reflect. He begins to see that perhaps life is not defined by what happens to him, but by how he chooses to see what happens. The hunger that once felt like punishment now feels like a teacher, whispering of patience. The cold that once seemed cruel now reminds him of endurance. Nothing in his surroundings has become easier, yet the weight of it all feels lighter. This is the quiet birth of transformation, not through control, but through awareness. Reflection becomes the mirror through which the boy meets himself. In that stillness, he begins to see the space between reaction and understanding. He notices how the same event can bring anger one day and wisdom the next, depending on how open his heart is. The world has not changed, only his seeing has. He begins to understand that perception is a lens, and every moment invites him to clean that lens a little more. The dust of resentment, the fog of fear, the smudge of comparison, all blur the truth. But when he looks inward, when he dares to face himself without judgment, clarity returns. The more he reflects, the more he sees that the power to transform does not lie in wealth or circumstance, but in the depth of awareness he brings to each breath. Through reflection, the boy begins to walk differently. His steps carry the same body, but a lighter spirit. What once appeared as hardship now reveals hidden lessons waiting for him to notice. A broken sandal teaches him adaptability. A long silence teaches him listening. A simple smile from a stranger teaches him compassion. The outer world remains imperfect, but the inner world begins to harmonize, and this inner harmony changes the meaning of everything he experiences. Transformation, he learns, is not about escaping what is. It is about awakening within it. The poor boy soon comes to realize that every difficulty he faces is a silent teacher. At first, hardship feels like an enemy, something to be feared, something to run from. But as time passes, and the struggles continue to visit him, he begins to see a pattern. Each challenge leaves behind something small, but precious, like a seed buried in the soil of pain. When hunger visits, it brings patience. When loss arrives, it brings humility. When loneliness lingers, it brings strength. These lessons do not come with comfort. They come with quiet endurance. The boy starts to see that hardship is not sent to break him, but to bend him gently toward wisdom. Patience becomes his first companion. The world does not move faster just because he wishes it to. And hunger does not fade simply because he commands it. He learns that waiting is not weakness. It is a form of faith. In the space between effort and result, patience teaches him trust. It teaches him that all things unfold in their own time, like the seasons, that even the harsh winter is part of the spring's return. Humility follows soon after. When he looks around and sees that every living thing depends on something else, the bird on the sky, the tree on the rain, the man on kindness, he understands that no one truly stands alone. To be humble is not to think less of himself, but to see himself as part of a greater whole. From these two lessons, strength quietly emerges. Not the strength of defiance, but the strength of acceptance, the kind that endures without complaint, that rises again after every fall. The boy's strength is not loud. It does not need to prove itself. It lives in his persistence, in the calmness of his eyes when the storm returns. He learns that true strength is not born in comfort, but in moments when there seems to be none left. The more he endures, the more he realizes that hardship is not a punishment, but a passage, a path carved by life itself to reveal what has always been inside him. As the poor boy continues his journey, he begins to notice something subtle yet profound. Those who possess much often seem restless, while those who have little sometimes carry peace in their eyes. This realization stirs something within him. He begins to question what wealth truly means. He had once believed that wealth was measured in coins, in land, in the comfort of having more than enough. But as he grows in understanding, he sees that the richest moments of his life have come not from possession, but from presence. The taste of clean water after thirst, The warmth of sunlight on a cold morning, the kindness of a stranger who shares a piece of bread. These small, ordinary gifts begin to shimmer with a quiet kind of abundance. Through them, he learns that gratitude transforms scarcity into fullness. Gratitude becomes his new form of currency. Each breath, each meal, each sunrise is received not with expectation, but with appreciation. He realizes that the more thankful he becomes, the less he feels the ache of what is missing. Gratitude does not fill his pocket, but it fills his heart. It allows him to see beauty where others see nothing. In the worn path he walks daily, in the songs of the birds that wake before him, in the laughter of children playing with nothing but imagination. He understands that meaning does not need grandeur to exist. It can live in the simplest gesture, in the smallest moment. Gratitude opens his eyes to the richness of being alive, to the quiet miracle of now. In time, the boy begins to see that wealth without meaning is emptiness disguised as success. The pursuit of things, he realizes, often blinds the heart to the value of moments. He may still wear old clothes and sleep beneath the same humble roof, but he carries within him a treasure that cannot be stolen, the ability to see the sacred in the ordinary. To him, a meal shared with sincerity is richer than a feast eaten in loneliness, a single kind word more valuable than gold spoken without care. The boy has not gained fortune in the world's eyes, yet he walks with a posture of quiet abundance. In his gratitude, he discovers a truth many overlook. That real wealth begins when the heart learns to be full, even when the hands are empty. As the days pass and the boy continues his humble walk through life, he begins to see that every trial leaves behind a trace of wisdom. The wounds of yesterday no longer ache as they once did. They have turned into quiet teachers, shaping him from within. What once felt like meaningless suffering begins to reveal purpose. He sees that endurance is not merely surviving the storm, but learning to breathe calmly within it. Endurance is the bridge between pain and understanding. It carries him from confusion to clarity, from despair to discovery. Every time he chooses not to give up, he steps closer to a deeper kind of strength, one that does not come from the body but from the spirit. In his endurance, the boy starts to awaken to a quiet truth. Pain itself is not the enemy. It is the signal of transformation. The seed must first crack before the sprout can emerge. The caterpillar must dissolve before the wings appear. Likewise, his hardships are not obstacles placed before him, but invitations placed within him, calling him to grow beyond his former self. He learns that pain purifies, it strips away arrogance, softens the heart, and reveals what truly matters. What remains after pain is not weakness, but clarity, the understanding that strength is not about avoiding difficulty, but about facing it with open eyes and a steady heart. Through enduring his trials, the boy begins to sense that enlightenment is not a distant destination, but a quiet realization that blooms in the midst of struggle. He no longer asks, "Why must I suffer?" but instead wonders, "What is this moment teaching me?" That shifting question changes everything. He finds that even in the midst of pain, there is light, faint at first, but constant. It is the light of awareness, the gentle flame of resilience that grows brighter with each experience. And in learning to endure, he is not merely surviving, he is evolving. What once hurt him now refines him. What once weakened him now guides him. The same fire that burns also illuminates, and through it, he learns that pain was never a punishment, it was preparation for becoming whole. As the boy grows in understanding, he begins to see that his story is not his alone. Everywhere he looks, he finds reflections of his own struggle in different forms. The merchant fears losing his wealth. The farmer prays for rain. The The scholar worries his knowledge will fade. The mother weeps for her child. Each carries their own burden, each walks their own road of uncertainty. It is then that the boy realizes poverty is not always about possessions, and struggle is not bound to circumstance. Every human heart, no matter how adorned on the outside, knows the quiet ache of longing, the hidden weight of worry. In this way, the poor little boy within him exists in everyone, in their doubts, in their dreams, in their search for meaning. This realization softens him. Where once he felt isolated in his pain, he now feels connected by it. He understands that suffering is a thread that weaves through all lives, binding us not in weakness, but in shared humanity. It humbles him to know that others too are fighting unseen battles, smiling while they hurt, standing tall while they tremble inside. The universality of struggle becomes a kind of quiet equality, a reminder that beneath all roles, titles, and appearances, every soul is learning how to endure, how to heal, how to rise. The boy's empathy deepens, and with it comes compassion. Not the pity that looks down, but the understanding that looks across, heart to heart. In seeing his pain reflected in others, the boy begins to dissolve the boundaries between himself and the world. He realizes that when one person suffers, it is not an isolated moment. It ripples through the fabric of life. And when one person finds peace, that peace too spreads quietly, like warmth in the cold. The boy understands that to recognize the poor little boy within oneself is to recognize the shared essence of humanity, the fragile yet resilient spirit that keeps moving forward, no matter how many times it is tested. In this awareness, struggle no longer separates, it unites. The boy sees that he is not just one story among many, but a single verse in a song sung by all. As the boy continues his quiet journey through the changing seasons of his life, he begins to sense that every moment of suffering has carried with it a hidden message. At first, he mistook his pain for punishment, believing that life was unfairly testing him, withholding joy as if he had done something wrong. But over time, as he looks back on the path he has walked, he starts to see a pattern in the pain, a thread of purpose running through every hardship. The hunger that once made him cry also taught him the value of gratitude. The loneliness that once hollowed his heart made space for understanding. Each trial has shaped him into something more aware, more gentle, more alive. He realizes that suffering is not life's cruelty, but life's call, a whisper urging him to awaken to truths that comfort could never teach. He learns that suffering strips away illusions. When everything easy is taken, only what is essential remains. Through his hardest days, he discovers that the soul grows not in moments of pleasure, but in moments of pressure. It is in pain that the mind grows quiet enough to listen, and the heart grows soft enough to feel. Life's challenges, he understands, are not sent to destroy him, but to dissolve what is false. The pride, the fear, the dependence on things that do not last. What remains after the suffering is not brokenness, but clarity. He begins to see that pain is the chisel that shapes the spirit, carving out space for wisdom to enter. And as his awareness deepens, the boy begins to look at suffering differently, not as something to escape, but as something to understand. He notices that every time he endures with openness, something within him expands. He becomes less reactive, more observant, more compassionate toward others who suffer as he once did. Pain, he realizes, is not a punishment handed down from life, but a teacher rising from within it. It comes not to close his heart, but to open it, not to weaken him, but to wake him. Each hardship becomes a moment of initiation, a threshold through which he steps into greater awareness of himself and of life's quiet wisdom. Through suffering, he does not fall apart, he falls inward, where awakening quietly waits. In the quiet that follows his long journey, the boy begins to realize that what he sought in the world was never truly outside him. The hunger that once pushed him to chase, to question, to wander, it was not a hunger for food or fortune, but a longing for understanding. With each hardship, he has peeled away the outer layers of need, only to find something untouched and eternal within. Beneath all his struggle lies a stillness, a quiet space that does not depend on what he owns or what he lacks. It is a space of calm that life cannot give or take away, the center of his being. And when he touches that stillness, he feels a kind of wealth that no coin could ever represent. It is the richness of simply existing, of breathing, of being aware. In that stillness, he meets himself for the first time, not as a poor boy or wanderer, not as someone who must prove his worth, but as a soul that has always been whole. The noise of comparison, the ache of envy, the fear of inadequacy, they all fade like echoes in the distance. What remains is simplicity. He discovers that peace does not arrive from reaching somewhere new. It emerges when he stops running from where he already is. The more he looks inward, the more he sees that the world's definitions of success and failure are fleeting shadows. True success, he realizes, is being content in one's own being, to live without pretending, to give without expectation, to stand in silence and feel at home within oneself. Through reflection, he understands that inner richness is not a treasure to be found, but a truth to be remembered. It was there when he was a poor little boy walking barefoot in the dust, and it remains now, glowing quietly beneath the surface of his awareness. He learns that stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness beyond measure. It is the peace that arises when one no longer resists life, when one accepts joy and sorrow as equal guests in the same house of the heart. In this stillness, the boy feels neither superior nor lacking. He simply is. And in that simple being, he discovers the quiet, timeless wealth of the soul, the richness that was never lost, only waiting to be seen. And so, the story of the poor little boy is not one of sorrow, but of awakening. He began with empty hands, but discovered a heart full of life. He walked barefoot through hardship, yet each step carried him closer to truth. In his simplicity, he found depth. In his struggles, he found wisdom, and in his stillness, he found peace. Perhaps that poor little boy still lives in each of us, the part that feels small, unseen, or unworthy. But when we stop running from him and instead listen to his quiet voice, we begin to understand. He does not ask for pity, he asks for presence. He reminds us that even in our weakest moments, something sacred is unfolding, a strength growing, a lesson forming, a light waiting to be known. So when life feels heavy and the path seems uncertain, remember the poor little boy. Sit beneath your own tree of silence, breathe and listen. The same wind that once spoke to him still speaks today, softly, truthfully, and always with love. It whispers that what you are searching for has been within you all along.